In this video, we're going to talk about 10 timeless money rules from Benjamin Franklin himself. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
There are a lot of financial gurus out there that we listen to that provide great financial information. Dave Ramsey, Robert Kiyosaki, Susie Orman all come to mind. They provide information both in video and in print, and people gobble it up because, well, they provide a lot of really good stuff most of the time. But the original financial guru, one of the first to write about money ever, by the way, is Ben Franklin. Benjamin Franklin controlled the equivalent of the internet back then. He had printing presses. That's how he made his fortune. And so with his printing presses, he provided a lot of information that was quite useful through something called Poor Richard's Almanac, as well as about a dozen books on the subject. And we're going to cover the 10 things that I feel are the most impactful then and now. By the way, today's University of Pennsylvania was funded by Benjamin Franklin, and it grew from a very small college to a very large college over the course of a few hundred years. One of his most famous quotes is, "Our necessities never equal our wants." Now, what this basically means is that as we acquire more wealth in our lives, we acquire more stuff in our lives. And no matter how much money you give someone, it will never be enough if they let the passion for stuff control their lives. Take, for example, a car, any car. Let's choose an SUV. If you went out and you bought a Ford Bronco, which is a really nice looking car, by the way, and you had that side by side with a Range Rover of the same size, let's call it a Range Rover Sport, just because they are approximately the same size, one would be 2, maybe even 3 times as expensive as the other. Yet they basically both do the same thing. But as you have more income, some people tend to scale up to the more expensive car, the Range Rover. So why do people buy the Range Rover when the Ford Bronco can do the same job? It's because of the way they feel when they drive the Range Rover. They feel significant. And significance in our lives is very, very expensive. The next quote that he provides starts off with a question and then the answer. Who is rich? He who rejoices in their portion. This is what I call the attitude of gratitude comment. Because if you look at our lives, we basically have it pretty good no matter where we are on the scale of income compared to a lot of people in the world. Yet people get very frustrated when they have to wait in line to see the doctor, to wait in line to buy concert tickets, to take their car to the mechanic to have it repaired instead of just buying a new car, using the previous example for example, and a lot of other inconveniences that modern people in the United States have to deal with. But you take those same inconveniences and you say to someone who's in a third world country, which is a large portion of the planet, by the way, if they'd be okay with it, the vast, vast majority of them would say absolutely. Back then, people were standing in food lines to eat in many cases. And today, for the most part, if you go to the grocery store, often you're making the choice between chicken and beef and what is less expensive. Also, the grocery store provides a plethora of opportunity to save money. Some can even save almost the entire purchase price if they combine couponing, store flyers, and a few other techniques. When you compare that to 90 years ago or third world countries today, well, it's not even a contest. The next quote is, he does not possess wealth that allows wealth to possess him. And by the way, all of Franklin's writings, in fact, writings up through about 20 years ago, used he in a non-gender sense. So you're going to see that throughout this series of discussion points. This is one that I truly love because it makes the distinction between having money and being obsessed with it. Money in and of itself is a tool. It gets things done. But many people look at it as something to be revered, something to be worshipped. Take this stack of $100 bills, by the way. It has the tendency to provoke a visceral reaction just by me doing something like that. By the way, for those of you who don't know, a stack of 100 bills, whether it's 100 $100 bills or 100 $1 bills, is called a strap. So when you look at a strap of $100 bills, or in this case, 6 straps of $100 bills, it has a tendency to make people really, really focused on the currency. But it's just paper. That's all that it is. In fact, this isn't real money. Hopefully many of you know that, but if you don't, each one of these is Hollywood money. It's used in Hollywood sets. It costs about $5 per strap. Now, for those of you that actually had an emotional reaction to the 6 straps of $100 bills, why is that? It's because of the meaning that you attached to it. And meaning is everything. As an aside, these look quite real. If I walked into a store and put one down and tried to buy something, I'm not sure if it would actually work, but I know for sure that is a really, really bad idea. His next powerful quote is, "Having been poor is no shame, but being ashamed of it is." There are a lot of reasons people feel ashamed of their financial status, and it's not just being poor. It may be that you're rich, but not just as rich as the person next to you or down the street. This is particularly true in the United States, where there's a social aspect or a social class aspect attached to the amount of wealth that you have. But if you step out of the United States and you look to other parts of the world, money isn't necessarily the driver of what's considered to be social success. In fact, if you go to Europe, particularly old Europe, there were a lot of dukes and princes that didn't have a lot of money because, well, mom and dad spent it all and they were duke or prince in name only. But here in the United States, wealth does sometimes convey a level of status in the community. One only need to look at the performing arts to know that this is true. If you go to a play in New York City, you don't feel particularly attached to the individual in the play, but if you saw that same play in movie format and it was by a very famous and wealthy Hollywood actor, you'd feel quite attached to it. Part of that is the amount of wealth that that individual possesses for doing the same role that someone else is portraying here in New York in a on-Broadway play. His next point of wisdom, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail, is classic. Every single guru out there uses it. Every teacher uses it. It's a staple in the world today, and it was created by Benjamin Franklin himself. It's also my favorite of everything that Benjamin Franklin has printed, and here's why. Today, in this day and age, we are faced with a variety of different conflicts, issues, challenges that come upon us. Some we can't control, but yet we think we can. Others, we have some level of control, yet we don't prepare because we don't think we have control. And still others, we have complete control, but we need to plan a long, long way in advance. For example, I'm a New York Yankee fan, and if you're a New York Yankee fan, occasionally you'll go to a game and you'll see somebody with their ritual. The ritual is a particular shirt that looks a little different than the rest of their outfit, but it's their lucky shirt. Or they have their lucky coin that they're holding and squeezing as the Yankee players are at bat, etc. They think that that's their way of actually controlling the outcome of the game. But in reality, it's not going to change the outcome of the game. However, if you were somehow able to transport into the management office and you looked at the roster of upcoming players that they were considering, well, that might actually have an effect on the game. And I can tell you that being a Yankee manager, a talent scout, you probably wouldn't show up on the day and say, that one looks good, I'll have one of those. You would do a lot of work before the big day comes where you and other baseball teams are selecting this year's draft choices. More to the point, let's just say that you always aspired to help your child get into MIT, a wonderful and expensive school. And you said, you know what, I'm going to let the chips fall where they may, and if he or she gets in, that's great. And if they don't, well, there's always community college, or somewhere in between. I'm using that as a bit of an exaggeration because that's not how people really get into MIT. They know 4 years, 6 years, 8 years out that they want to get into a college at least similar to MIT, and they start working on the right grades and the right AP classes and the right volunteer work and the right clubs at school, and on it goes. So you're controlling the narrative so that by the time the application goes into MIT, it has the right stuff, so to speak, to get in. Does that ensure that your child's going to get into MIT? Well, no, not necessarily, but you'll get a lot closer to MIT, and maybe if you don't get into MIT, you might get into Brown or Yale or Harvard, some other wonderful school. But failing to prepare to get into MIT means that you're preparing to fail to get into MIT. You get the point. The next point, wealth is not his that has it, but his that enjoys it. This is what I call money is useless unless it adds some level of value to your life saying. Benjamin Franklin was trying to say that acquiring money just for money's sake isn't necessarily the way to go. In fact, frankly, if it just sits there, never used, well, outside of feeling a level of comfort that it's there, you can't really extrapolate any utility out of it. What's utility? It's a benefit or an enjoyment from the money. In other words, the acquisition of cash and stuffing it into your mattress or into your bank account isn't the ultimate objective. It's having an outcome with that cash. His next point is a little bit hard to understand because it was written in English from the mid-1700s, but what he says is, if you would know the value of money, try to borrow some. This is basically the concept that people, generally speaking, don't understand risk and reward when it comes to their own money, but there are other professionals who do. For example, if you went to your bank and they checked your credit score and it was in the 500s, you probably couldn't get a loan. If it was in the mid to high 700s, you could most likely get a loan. And if it was 800 or above, you could very likely get a loan. The bank will lend you money based on their perception that you understand the obligations that you've taken out and the likelihood that you're going to pay it back. His next point, he that waits for fortune is never sure of dinner. This is basically the point that if you're going to go and stake your claim in the world, just do it because it's not going to find you. This is basically the person that always wanted to start a business or always wanted to get a college degree or always wanted to go to medical school, but never did it because it just wasn't the right time. And instead, that same individual spent a lot of time doing frivolous things, waiting for their ship to come in. And it never did. His next point, I'd rather go to bed without dinner than rise in debt. Like so many of Benjamin Franklin's points, this is designed to provoke an idea rather than being 100% correct because, frankly, people don't skip dinner, even back in the day, if they had a bit of debt. The point is that debt is so bad that people should forego other things rather than continue to get deeper and deeper in debt. They should pay it off. More appropriately, in this day and age, what that probably means is don't order in 5 nights a week, don't order in at all, prepare your meals at home, and use the extra money to pay down your credit card debt. The next point from his publications is to remember that credit is money. Basically what he's saying is know that when you borrow money, you have to pay it back, and even if it feels easier to spend because you didn't have to do the work in the first place to acquire it like you would other money, you're going to have to do the work to pay it back. The direct analogy to today is that people who put a lot of money on their credit card feel a sense of ease when they buy whatever it is that they buy, but they're going to have to pay that back plus a lot more if they pay it over time. And so understand that going in, there's no free money in the world. Gang, I know that this is a little bit different than what I normally put on the channel, but I thought it would be important for me to give you my views on the thinking from one of the greatest financial gurus of the time. If you like this video, check out that video, the average retirement savings at age 60. Also, don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications so that you get alerted the next time I post a video. I post once or twice a week. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.